What are your thoughts as you see the events unfurling in Egypt?
Before anything, Mr. Morgan, if you allow me to say that Egypt has a very special place in my heart and my family's heart. It is the country that offered my family sanctuary and welcomed us with open arms. I'm eternally grateful to the Egyptian people on behalf of my family. This is something we will never forget. And we are, of course, grateful to both President Sadat and President Mubarak for having allowed us the opportunity to visit Egypt, to be able to pay our respects on my father's tomb, which, as you know, lies in Egypt. Having said that, I've been, of course, following the recent events very closely. And what I can tell you is not necessarily specific to Egypt, but when we see Iran, we see Tunisia, and we see many other things, I think it speaks of a new era, and it speaks of a new generation, a generation that demands to be heard, a generation that can no longer take no for an answer, a generation that expects to have every right in freedom and participation, and of course opportunities. And as such, I think it is time for the world to recognize that if we had had eras where leaders would make decisions or foreign powers would make decisions, isn't it about time that we let the people make the decisions and have a choice?
Isn't the problem with that is that it's a great idea in theory. We all would agree with this. Power to the people, give them what they want. As you know better than most, in 1979 in Iran, the wrong kind of people took over, many would argue. You got these Islamic fundamentalists came in, suddenly it turned into a very different country very quickly. You know, I could see potentially the danger here with Egypt. If people aren't careful and this political void goes on too long, you could see a similar problem where extremists come in and you end up with a very, very different country.
No, of course I would understand those who would be concerned about that outcome. But then again, don't we learn from history? I hope we do. And I don't think you should underestimate the intelligence of people who have known how wrong things could turn by looking at what happened in Iran. I don't think that what has propelled Tunisians or Egyptians or Yemenis or even Jordanians to speak out is motivated by the Islamists who took over our country and have kept it hostage for 30 years. I think they take heart for what happened in 2009 of the Green Movement and the aspiration of today's generation who has, by trial and error and by paying a very heavy price, appreciates where it is that we have a separation of religion from state as a prerequisite to democracy. They appreciate human rights. They appreciate those things that would be jeopardized should they fall into the trappings of extremists taking over. I don't think people are oblivious to that. So give people a little bit more faith on that, but work with them, help them so that indeed we cannot have the wrong outcome. And the best way to guarantee that you won't have a wrong outcome is to help the institutions that are moderate, that are secular, that are democratic, because the radicals will then be marginalized. On the other hand, if you don't do all of the above, these forces will become cynical, they will become hostile, which is the perfect breeding ground for extremists who always take advantage of that and turn it in their advantage.
Have you or any of your family spoken to President Mubarak in the last week?
Not in recent weeks, of course. My mother, who regularly goes to Egypt every year, again, on the anniversary of my father's passing, you know, has opportunities sometimes to visit with the president's wife. I haven't had any recent contact, so I've nothing new to really indicate.
You now live in America. You
Yes.
have your home here in Washington.
Yes.
There's obviously a very divided opinion now in America, a growing division here between people who believe that you should stay loyal to your friends and that President Mubarak, even though he's been oppressive to his people, has on a bigger global stage certainly been an ally of America and done some very important work for America. And there are those who say, well, forget all that. He's treated his people badly. The people are now rebelling against him. They want a new government, a new regime. They want freedom and democracy. Which side of the fence are you? Because you've been through all this in different circumstances, but it's a similar ideology. Which way are you going here? Do you think the people of Egypt now have the right to do what they're doing?
In my school of thought, I've always been for people power and the right to self-determination. Having said that, I still believe that President Mubarak has a historic opportunity to bring about the appropriate transition and go down as history as somebody who, at the end of his career, helped the country steer in the right direction if you hit the call of the people today the proper way. As such, I don't think that he should be either prejudged or pre-condemned, because it's an opportunity to demonstrate what you're willing to do. I think we should not...
but no government really should ever be allowed to mistreat their people in the way that in latter years he has done.
Of course. I mean,
because there can be no dispute that the police...
That's a no-brainer decision as far as whose side you're on. But having said that...
I mean, do you feel he's brought it on himself to a certain degree?
Well, I think, this is something for the Egyptian people to determine. And I think, that much later when history is written, we will certainly have a very objective assessment of when all the dust settles, so to speak. Right now, there's a crisis in Egypt. Where could it lead? Can it lead to a smooth transition? Could there be genuine reforms? Can there be free elections? Can there be an opportunity for the new generation to elect their own leaders the way they always wanted to? All of that depends on what the current leadership does. And if it does it the right way, and if the people are assured that this time they're going to be heard as opposed to be neglected yet again, I think we could, in this sense, avert chaos. We could, in this sense, see a transition that does not lead to anarchy, because that would be the worst-case scenario.